But when it comes to relationship, which does require work and emotional skill and growth and moving through the uncomfortable parts, and instead of saying, see ya, I'm just gonna go to the thing that feels fun, I'm like, I'm gonna sit with these uncomfortable emotions. I'm gonna do the work. I'm gonna listen to this podcast, Sex with Emily, with my partner so we can get better. Like, those are the hard things. And that is a different set of skill than the Casanova that can like sweep you off your feet for the first 3 weeks.
So we were told though, Cinderella, all the stories, we're still rewiring everything that we've had to learn in the past and realize it now. You're listening to Sex with Emily. I'm Dr. Emily, and I'm here to help you prioritize your pleasure and liberate the conversation around sex. In today's episode, you're going to hear from a powerful woman changing the game in how we do relationships. From breakups to proper dating and long-lasting love, Amy Chan is the founder of Renew Breakup Bootcamp and the author of Breakup Bootcamp, The Science of Rewiring Your Heart. And she's just an overall fun human. I love talking to her. And as you'll hear in today's podcast, we get into how to measure your chemistry compass, why it's important to date that short person, even if they aren't your type, and my personal favorite, how to spot the green flags in relationships. This one is so good and just in time for summer. Please rate and review Sex with Emily wherever you listen to the show. It just helps the show get out there to more people. It just takes 2 seconds. You can do it right now. You can also find me on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and Twitter, or X, or Facebook. It's all at Sex with Emily. And if you want to ask me about your sex life, your dating, or relationships, call my hotline, 559-TALK-SEX. That's 559-825-5739. Or just go to sexwithemily.com/askemily. And check out my new articles, How to Come on the Face, you guys are loving that one, and 7 solo sex positions. Those are all up on sexwithemily.com. All right, everyone, enjoy this episode. I asked my Sex with Emily audience their most embarrassing penis questions, and one that kept coming up was, how can I increase my ejaculation? Helped by the ever-growing popularity of the money shot in pornography, semen volume seems to be a conversation growing in popularity. So can you really increase your load? Well, the answer is yes. You've got to get your hands on Popstar's volume and taste enhancers. These supplements help build up semen and increase ejaculatory volume. Not to mention, there's an added bonus of improved semen taste. We've all heard that age-old rumor to eat pineapple to taste better. Well, this supplement actually uses the bromelain from pineapple along with zinc and L-arginine to improve your overall taste in 2 to 3 weeks. This product was created by 2 of the country's leading men's sexual health physicians, so you're in good hands. Popstar is all-natural, high-quality, vegan, and non-GMO, made from the best ingredients and scientifically proven to work. Plus, you know I've got you guys with a discount code. You can save 20% with code Emily at popstarlabs.com/Emily. That's popstarlabs.com/Emily. popstarlabs.com/Emily. Use code Emily at checkout. By now, you've probably heard my magic wand story. It's a brand that's been part of my personal journey for more than 20 years. But no matter how many times I sing Magic Wand's praises, I'll never be able to fully capture the story of this incredible brand. Well, now journalist and author Kate Sloan just completed a limited audio series documenting the history and impact that Magic Wand has created over the last 56 years. It's called Making Magic. And the series chronicles Magic Wand's incredible brand story through interviews with nearly 40 experts, performers, business owners, educators, and fans. So I got a sneak preview of this series, and what I loved is that Kate weaves together snippets from all their interviews into this amazing story arc. She covers Magic Wand's journey from appliance store massager to its legendary influence on culture and sexual independence, and it's all just fascinating. The first episodes of Making Magic are available now at makingmagicseries.com or on all popular podcast platforms. Just search for Making Magic or visit makingmagicseries.com today. Today, I'm joined by a relationship expert who's been called the scientific Carrie Bradshaw. Amy Chan is the founder of Renew Breakup Bootcamp and author of Breakup Bootcamp, The Science of Rewiring Your Heart. Come on, where was this book when I was going through all my alpha breakups? I want to know. I wish I had it. This is a very different kind of relationship book. It not only helps you face breakups of any kind, but also uses your own patterns to help you truly rewire your brain for happiness. She's just one of those authentic people who uses her own heartache to empower others and helps us all get through it. And then come out on the other side with genuine happiness. Plus, it's all backed by science. She also has a dating boot camp, which she'll get into, and I just can't wait to talk to her. Amy Chan, you are talking about this dating boot camp that you are launching, which makes so much sense. So many of us are just not great daters.
Yeah, so a lot of people come to me saying, I'm ready for a relationship, I want to start a family. And then when I look at their actions, it's completely the opposite. And I have my clients do a dating experiment where they have to date 12 different people, but they're not allowed to get into a relationship with any of them. And so during this time, they have to date people totally outside their type. Because if I tell someone like, just date outside your type, they'll be like, okay, whatever. But if I actually have them do this experiment and then learn from each one, they start to get exposed to people who treat them well. And then they're like, oh, I thought I wanted this, right? Like I have a client. She is an entrepreneur and she's like, I can only date entrepreneurs because I'm an entrepreneur. And she did this dating experiment. And along the way, she met a guy who had a 9-to-5 job. And, you know, he's going to have a pension in a couple of years and totally not her type. And she was freaking out about it. And I was like, you're in the experiment, just keep going. And she's been with him for 3 years now. Totally outside her type, exactly what she needed, but not what she thought she wanted.
Okay, so how do we know then? How do you get people to realize that what their type is, to recognize it and then go the other way?
I have them look at the last 3 relationships, and it might even just be a situationship, right? 3 last romantic connections, and then write down the 5 main emotions that came up for each one. And then you go and you circle what were the emotions that are continuing. And there's usually a thread because it's the emotional experience that repeats.
Okay.
The package might look different. So a lot of people are like, I don't have a type. This person was this tall. This person did this job. But, oh, I felt anxiety because I was chasing them. And that's a common thread throughout all of them.
So what are some of those common types that come up?
I have a lot of women that complain that they're unavailable, they're all Peter Pans, they're man children, no one wants to commit. Mm-hmm. And then we dial it back, like one of my clients who was like, you know, like I get ghosted and like the guys in LA, they're just all like this. And then I'm like, okay, what's your height requirement in your dating app? They're like 6'2". And then I'm like, okay, so you're ready to settle down as long as he's 6'2" with a chiseled jawline and blue eyes. Right. And then I'm like, okay, so part of your experiment is you need to date someone shorter than you. And she literally fell off her chair. She's like, Amy, please, no, I can't.
Like, no, anything but that. Then what happens?
And then they do it. And then they might not be like, oh my God, I'm in love with this person. But again, because with the experiment, you're not supposed to get into a relationship with them. So it takes the pressure off of, I need to meet my soulmate. And they just are able to be present, right? Like there's no pressure here. And what eventually happens is most of the time, my clients don't make it through because around the 8-person mark, they end up with someone and they're like, I am with someone I would have never given a chance to.
And I love that you take the pressure off them because when we are dating, many people go into dates thinking like, is this the one? Like I can imagine us having children or we're analyzing. And it's like to take that off and to say, no, when you're just going to be present, you're going to see how you feel with them. Do you actually like this person? Really, it takes the pressure off to just kind of really be present and really pay attention to who you are and what you like.
I look at dating through a dating funnel, right? My background is marketing and top funnel is lead generation. It's just prospecting. And then the next stage is discovery, dates 1 to 2. And your strategy for that stage is going to be very different than like the bottom of the funnel. And I say this controversial thing where your first date, you just want to see, am I having fun? Do I want to see this person again? Don't look at like, are you going to be my future baby daddy? Like, do you have the type of job that I like? Don't look at any of that stuff because it makes you not present. It also makes you look almost like in a way, objectify them because they're no longer human. You're just looking to see if they fit this plan and fantasy you have in your mind and the timeline. And if they plug in and you get that kind of like job interview energy, which is just not sexy.
I know. And getting people to realize that that's what they're doing. I mean, that really is probably what the majority of people do, right?
Yeah.
I never dated that way personally, but I think that most people, when you're at a certain point, you're like, this person's going to complete me in all of these ways. It's not just like, you know, maybe we'll have something in common or maybe I'll make a new friend. But that you sort of help people reverse engineer that and look at it a little bit differently and say, it's just an experience with somebody. You get to, you know, see if there's a connection and learn what that feels like.
But I find more so now, people are so heavily guarded. And I think that, look, it's great that we're all talking about boundaries, amazing. But we've gotten to a point where instead of boundaries, we are building walls. And we are not trusting people, and it's showing in the data. People are veering more avoidantly attached. We don't trust the media. We don't trust the government. We don't trust our neighbor. We don't trust romantic partners. And so we've gone too much to the extreme where we are not taking the risk of vulnerability and opening up. And how are you going to spark connection when you're like, I don't know, are you a narcissist? Are you a psychologist? Are you a psychopath? Are you going to do something bad to me? It's hard.
Oh, you take this attachment style quiz, we take the love languages. Before we go on a date, I need you to check all these boxes. Yeah. I'm going to analyze.
Are you wasting my time?
Exactly.
And I know I used to do this when I was in New York. I would not want to kind of find out how much money they make, but so what area do you live in? Tribeca? Okay. I'm leaning in, right? And so, but by doing that, I'm judging them. Do you fit in this box of what I think I want? And that makes you out of the present.
So then is it really that we shouldn't figure out what we want? How do we figure out the right things that we want?
I think that you want to be clear in your values, and your values act as your compass, not just in romantic relationships, but in friendships, to the opportunities that you take. And when you're really clear with that, and you start to look at, how am I living in integrity with these values? And I have my clients rate themselves on these values that they want in another person. I'll have people oh yeah, honesty. I want honesty. And I'm like, okay, what do you rate yourself? 10 out of 10. I'm like, but you won't talk to your mom about this really big thing, but you're honest at work, but you're not honest here. It doesn't work that way. Integrity isn't a part-time thing when it's convenient. So why don't you start taking accountability, take some action to increase your score of honesty, and then maybe when you get that up higher, you'll call that in with someone else.
Exactly. Becoming the person that you want to find, right?
Yeah.
Really, that's what this is about, how we sort of your work is about how we use our breakups and the pain that comes with it to really become a greater version of ourselves, to work on ourselves in all of these areas. So I want to go back to breakups now. When I was going through your breakup boot camp and your book and looking at your videos, it really took me back to something I hadn't thought about in a long time. And that was my first breakup. And it was so devastating. And I think for many people, right, the first breakup is really hard because you haven't gone through it before. Yeah. So anyway, I was 16 years old, and I remember his name was Lance. And I remember he broke up with me, and I was lying on the floor in Michigan, freezing cold in the winter, lying in front of a space heater, rolled up, just so sad and feeling that, my life was over, whatever. Why isn't this person choosing me? And I really haven't thought about that kind of thing in a while, because I think as you get older, the breakups get a little bit easier. You kind of know, but there's some patterns that repeat. So first I was thinking, why weren't you there to help? We really need you to help us, because then I was thinking you get locked in then also to certain patterns. For him, he left me so that I wanted to shut my heart down and not be as open. And I think other breakups, you just sort of, when we think of a breakup, we think of you're devastated, you're sitting on the couch, eating ice cream, calling your friends, you can't get out of bed for weeks. That's a breakup. We all know that it's very, very painful. But let's talk about your version of that and what we should do. Is there time to cry on the couch and to be sad? And, what do we do?
Yeah. So I think the very first thing is, when we can have a healthy relationship with our emotions, that's a game changer in life, because feeling sad over a breakup and feeling like there's been a death that's happened, that's not bad. And I think sometimes, especially because I work with a lot of overachievers, it's the pain is bad. How am I going to get out of this? How shameful that I'm feeling this. But we have to be able to feel all of them in order to process it. And if you don't process that pain, that's what turns into baggage. And it just stays with you. And then there's the next breakup, and then there's a little bit more added to your baggage, and you just keep bringing it to relationship. And then we start to blame ourselves, and we're I can't find anyone to date. Why do I keep getting the same, unavailable person? And we can then be oh, there's something wrong with me. And it's not. It's that there's been layers of stuff that hasn't been dealt with. And so I think number one is process the emotions. It's okay to feel. And then there's like different stages, right? So depending on what stage you're in, I think it requires a different strategy. In the very beginning, you're in shock and in denial. And what you need to do is talk about it as much as you can with people you trust, journal it, let it out, release. And then a little bit later on is when you can start looking at the lessons. But I would never tell someone in the very beginning to start analyzing their patterns. You're talking about how like we get the breakup, we call our friends, we have ice cream. And I think something that happens that I notice a lot is we get together with our friends who love us, and then it becomes this bashing of the ex. And it's like eating junk food. In that moment, it feels great, but it actually does a lot of harm. And so when I'm helping people, if you are still blaming your ex, vilifying your ex, analyzing your ex, hoping for your ex to change, you're still in a relationship with your ex. And sometimes we hold on to the pain because it's the last part of the relationship we have left, but we're not aware that we're doing it. Mm-hmm. So these hate fest rabbit holes that we get into can be really destructive and just keep you more attached. Yeah.
Amy Chia, how did you go from like having like this terrible breakup to building essentially a breakup bootcamp empire? How does that happen?
So when I went through this breakup, it was like a Band-Aid ripped off, and all the stuff I never dealt with, starting from like the stuff with my dad, like everything came to the surface, but I didn't know. I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the understanding. So I just blamed it all on my ex. And I had crazy revenge fantasies that might have included buying bed bugs, like crazy stuff. And so when I finally healed from that, and it took a while, I asked myself, like, what happens to people who don't have the books, don't have friends that will support them, don't have couches to stay on? Like, what happens to them? Because I was so close to doing something so destructive. And I realized I had to create what didn't exist for me, which was a safe place out in nature that you can go where there's experts specifically helping you with the type of pain and grief that comes from breakup. So as much as breakups feel so horrible and we want it to end, I love breakups because it is a period of time where there's a shakeup where you can redirect your life. And you might not know because you're in the tornado. What happens as human beings, we love complacency. We love our baseline. And even if that baseline is anxiety or chaos or someone that we have no feelings for and we're apathetic, we're unlikely to choose uncertainty and risk because it's too uncomfortable. So a breakup yanks you out of that, and you have a window period of time where you can get off of this treadmill that you've been on and make some serious changes. So I'm excited for people when I work with them at Breakup Bootcamp because we want to look at what is the pattern that has been playing out, the emotional experience, and is it one of a repetition compulsion where you're reenacting a scene from your childhood in an attempt to change its ending in a subconscious way?
Yeah. I mean, really, that's exactly, it's not necessarily about that person, right? We always think you break up with someone and we're so angry at them and they've done all these things. But once we can look at ourselves, we realize it's really, it's not really about them. It's always about us, right?
Yeah.
It's our own stuff that we have to go into and peel back the layers. Like, this is how I got love from my parents. And this is, what it meant about my self-esteem and all these things. So really getting into ourselves so we can go, heal and date in a healthier way in the future.
Yeah,
for sure.
Exactly. It's never just about the ex. There's recycled pain.
Can you talk about this recycled pain?
Yeah.
Because so much of this is like, I'm always saying, this is the work that we do. It's like everything's from childhood. I'm like, no, it really is. Even if your parents, you think they're perfect, it's just about being a parent, having a caregiver. You're going to be learning something from each other, and you're going to have these patterns that might no longer serve you. So I think everybody, it's so important to do that work. But how would you even explain that, the recycled pain that we're carrying?
I don't want us to go and be like, it's your mom's fault, you have an anxious attachment style. That's not the point, right? We want to understand the root of these behaviors that are no longer serving us because we adapt. And as children, when we don't have tools, it might have been really helpful to dive into work and, not deal with emotions and be the person who's very useful and helpful in fixing things. And then we don't realize that those same habits that helped us when we were a child is wreaking havoc in our relationships in our 30s. So I think to start is to look at what is the history telling you? What is the emotional experience that keeps repeating? And how are you currently accountable for that? It doesn't mean that the person who cheated on you, it doesn't need to take accountability. It doesn't mean you have to forgive anyone. I'm just saying, at what parts do you have control over? And one for me was unavailability, right? I always was like, unavailable guys, like in New York, it sucks. In LA, it sucks. And then when I looked at my own behavior, I was like, oh, like how convenient is it for me to chase these guys that clearly are not that into me by the actions and inactions, but I can then say, oh yeah, you're the one who's unavailable, and not confront that I was unavailable and I was acting in a way that made me always have that same conclusion.
Had the same realization. I kept saying, they're not available, they're not here. Like, it's just, it's them, kind of blaming everyone else. And then I realized, oh shit, I'm not emotionally available too. I had to do that work and realize, like, what does it actually mean? So would you say that most people, what would be an exercise for people to realize right now? Because there are those people who go through breakups, and maybe this is part of it, who aren't ready to look at themselves for a while. They're like, they just want to stay in the he's an asshole or she did this terrible thing. And I know I have friends and people on the show who've carried on this hate and this disdain and blame for their partners for years. And I'm like waiting. I'm like, come on, we got to look at your part. There's two of us in every relationship, and we bring that into the relationship. But it can be so hard just to get in there and start to look, because it's the stuff we've been avoiding our whole life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it kind of sounds like with your work, you're like, might even be the first stop for them, just saying like, okay, enough. I am done repeating it. Let's do the work.
Yeah.
Right?
And like I interview anyone who wants to come to the boot camp, because there are some people who aren't ready. And that life force energy, which is like, I don't want this to repeat again, and I'm going to look inside. I don't have the tools. I don't know how I'm going to get out of it. That I cannot teach. And so when someone is like, it's all their fault and blah, 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 when they are so attached to being a victim, even though they might have had terrible things happen and there is no opening to look outside of that perspective, I cannot help them.
Is there anything that you've been able to say to these people to get them out of it? Or do you think it's a timing thing? Like eventually they're going to get to the place where they can see their part?
It's tough, right? Like all I can do is ask questions that can cause them to look inside. And if they want to, they can. And if they can't, I think also as a former codependent, I'm also learning that it's not my job to take someone out of their emotional experience or to fix it. And sometimes that journey is that they need to spend 3 years blaming their ex and holding on to that pain because that gives them a sense of connection. That's their journey. Even though it makes me uncomfortable,
it's true. We're not responsible for anyone. We have to all get to it on our own. Why do you think that so many of us had the experience of choosing the same person over and over again that isn't right for us, and we know it's not right for us? It's a little bit what you talked about, the patterns, but what about that? Yeah. How do we recognize that, and how do we stop that?
I've come up with this thing called the chemistry compass, and how it's not you that's broken if you keep choosing these people that aren't healthy. Your chemistry compass might be broken. And our chemistry compass means that human beings, we are drawn to what is familiar. It's across the board, whether it's food, music, or romantic partners. And so say you came from a household where there was a very unavailable parent, where you had to prove yourself, earn their love. That can become very familiar, to do something to earn love. You might in the future, without knowing it, feel chemistry, this 10 out of 10, I want to rip your clothes off, because subconsciously you've picked up cues that it feels like home. And so you can tell you have a broken chemistry compass if you just look at your last few relationships, and were they healthy? Were you happy with them? And if not, and typically that's the type of people who come to me, then you can't trust that 10 out of 10 chemistry. In fact, that's not a green light, it's a red light. And so I really help people to adjust their chemistry compass, to start having exposure therapy to people who are kind, who are available, to a more peaceful, and to not confuse intensity and anxiety with love.
Love bombing, someone's all over you, you're the one. Like that doesn't necessarily mean that that's love. I mean, truly. I mean, it really is, I guess, hard to get people about to kind of try to look at this. But to say to someone, I know you have great chemistry and you're feeling these fireworks, but that's actually what we're trying to like rewire. So that is the exposure therapy. And they're going out with new people and they're realizing like, I actually can feel connection and actually attraction. Can you talk, what about like attraction? They go out with someone. So the first time you set up with someone, she's like, I'll never go out with the short man. And she goes out with the short man. And then maybe she goes a few times and then she might find like attraction starts to grow. What do you think about that? When it starts to grow and how much time do we give someone? Some people want to give up on the first date.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't into it.
I look at it on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being like, I want to rip their clothes off at first sight, 0 being disgust. We don't bounce back from disgust. No. So if you feel a 5 or above, you go again. And the thing is, there's, the mere exposure effect. The more we're exposed to someone, the more it'll amplify the base feeling. So your brain might not cognitively process what type that connection is. Is it sexual? Is it more friendly? You don't know yet until you have more data. And you don't have enough data on the first date or even the second date because often it's our representative showing up. And so like if it's a 5, it doesn't hurt to go again. And then after, I think, a series of dates where you're like, oh, it's just really it's not moving anywhere, then you can make a decision of like, okay, I'm going to stop.
We're going to be right back with more Amy Chan after a short break for our sponsors. Stick around. Well, how do you help people with the green flags? People love talking about red flags, but are there certain character traits or anything across the board that you like are like, this is what you want to be looking for to know that you are actually with somebody who makes you feel good in your body, who's healthy?
Yeah. It feels calm. You don't have an activated nervous system. And that was the one thing that was a major realization with me when I met my partner. My now partner, in the beginning, I didn't know. I went in with that whole, I'm just going to have fun and that's it. I'm not going to size him up to see if he's going to be my future husband. I'm just going to be present. And I remember after our first date, I didn't feel the need to announce it to everyone like, oh my God, like I've met the one 28 times, by the way. And it just felt calm. And I didn't doubt, like he messaged back. He asked me out to go again. Like there was this flow and ease to things. And I think at that point, I had done enough work because I'd done the dating experiment on myself. And I stopped confusing that someone who's showing up as boring or too nice or a doormat. And I'm like, oh, actually, this is familiar now. This is the way I want to be treated.
You have to retrain your nervous system to find other things calming and appealing. So what about the men? Like, what would you say are some of their patterns that they're breaking?
A lot of the times with the men, the research supports this, and also what I've seen is there's more of a tendency after a breakup to distract and avoid. And it's not because of a biological thing, it's a socialization thing. So I see often they will jump right back into the apps. They'll, date people, get into a relationship right away. A lot of times they'll also date the opposite of whoever they were with. And then it eventually catches up and it either blows up or they have regret. And again, they're carrying that baggage. So it's wonderful when I see men show up at the breakup bootcamp. But that's one of the things is not doing that because it's uncomfortable and allowing yourself to sit.
Yeah, I was thinking like breakup bootcamp is like Vegas. Like for guys, like I'm going to go there and I'm going to break up and sleep with everyone I know. That's what, or meet new people and sleep with them. But it is interesting because what we're saying is that for breakups, what you're saying is that we have to eventually feel it. Mm-hmm. Like I think that we think that it takes time to, heal all wounds and heal our emotions, but it really doesn't. We have to go in and feel it. So maybe with some people, they're avoiding it by going out and sleeping around. And for some people, they're actually stepping in and like doing this kind of work. So God, it saves so much time if we just start processing it, right? We have enough information after even a few times going on dates, even like realizing like, what do I actually like? What makes me feel good? Because what I love is like you're helping people sort of turn it back on them. Like, how do you want to be a better person? How do you want to show up in the world? Like people are just thinking, I have a broken heart. I want to get out of it so I can jump into another relationship. Right. And I think that you're filling in this gap, this place where they need to stop in the middle and just say like, okay, what can I, how can I become the best version of myself before I do this again?
Yeah. And I think like just even assessing like, what in this last relationship, what do I want to take away as I want more of? And what do I not? we need to sometimes go through these experiences to figure out what we don't want, to then figure out what we do want. And that's a pathway I took, like a lot of like, oh, I don't want that. I don't want that. And then I was like, okay, this is actually how I want to feel. And I think the focus changes on like, are they like this? Are they this tall? To like, if I'm an anxious wreck of a person after a date, it doesn't matter how good they are on paper or how hot they are. I'm looking at how I feel, and that is a clear signal that something in my body is saying no.
So these are the kind of things you teach, like, what are you actually feeling? I think so many of us are used to like projecting, like, I hope this person likes me, and I hope that, you know, they choose me, or I hope I'm good enough. But it's like, really the reframe is how do I actually feel? Is this someone that I enjoy spending time with, right? And that is a skill set to be taught, which is what you work with people on, like knowing that, the knowing.
Yeah, and like giving it time. And so again, back to my whole dating funnel where like there's prospecting, discoveries, dates 1 to 2. And the third stage is evaluation. And that's like dates 3 to maybe 15. And a lot of people, especially people who are very ruled by chemistry, they skip this altogether. Or people who are so wanting to be chosen instead of believing that I am the one choosing. And so they skip the whole evaluation part, the part where you get to know someone through time. Like, are they who they say they are? Are they treating the wait staff well? Like all these little things that are data points so that you can make an informed decision.
Right. Like take the time. So what is that? Like, you talk about the different stages?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So top funnel is prospecting. Yeah. Okay. Just lead generation.
Okay.
I always say you want 3 sources of lead generation. So if you're only doing apps, then one other way is go on, do meetup groups on common interests. The third might be get friends to set you up. And then after that is discovery, dates 1 to 2. The only question you're asking yourself, am I having fun? Do I want to see them again? If it's a yes, you go. And then the third is evaluation. Evaluation is dates 3 to about 12, 15. And this is when you are deciding and like seeing this person through time, their values, their integrity. Is there an alignment? And then after that, you can make an informed decision. Do I want to go to the next stage, which is close? And that could be stepping up the level of commitment, however that looks like to you. And the last part of the funnel is retention. And that is a whole other book and bootcamp.
Okay. Right. Like it's so important though to recognize that way, because we often get very caught up in the early stages, right? So I think a lot of it is realizing that early stage, you have these chemicals, the most delicious cocktail of feel-good chemicals in the world are swirling in your brain, and you're falling in love, and you really don't see any of the red flags waving in the distance because you actually can't, because you're like filled up with all the stuff that feels good. But just like any drug that, you know, comes up, you got to come back down again. And I feel like with a lot of your work, you're kind of dealing with this for a lot of people, helping them realize that all the different stages of attraction and arousal, and that people are thinking like most of people's dating are predicated on those early time when it isn't even real. So it's like, what do we do? How do we show? Like, I almost want to like a PSA that's like, this is not real. Like, this is fun. You're good at gathering information, but not all the information.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that stage? How do you explain that and make it so people realize like, that's like, it's a good, we need it, it's important, but then we have to look at what comes next.
Yeah. I think the first 2-3 months of relationship, they don't count.
No,
they don't count.
They literally don't count.
Because like you can have the most avoidant person who like doesn't want a relationship at all, but they are motivated because of dopamine to conquest and to win you. And so they're romantic. They're texting all the time. They're initiating dates. And then they got you and suddenly they disappear and they're hot and cold. And you're like, oh my God, but I want to get it back to how it used to be. You didn't know that person. You don't know when someone is in a conquest mode. You don't know when it's just like the love drugs. You don't know if it's just a representative. You do not have enough data about someone. And so when you truly do and respect and have like a healthy sense of self-worth, and I know it's not easy, when you start building that, you don't get so blindsided by the fact that someone's buying you gifts or they're initiating dates. You're like, okay, cool. Well, let's see how you are consistently through time. And the small things that mean a lot, not because you bought me flowers.
Right. Because in that period, though, you idealize it. And do you find also that when people going through breakups are like, but that time it was so great. You talked about this pattern of we get just enough from somebody and they pull back. We get just enough, we go pull back from them. And that becomes our entire relationship. that we then think was kind of a healthy relationship because then it was good, it was bad. Can you talk about intermittent reinforcement?
Yeah. So there's this famous rat study where they put these rats in a cage, and every time the rat pressed the lever, they would get a pellet of food. And so the rat learns like, okay, I do this, I get the thing. That's continuous reinforcement. Then the experimenters were like, okay, well, what happens if we remove the food completely? The rat presses, not getting the food. Eventually, like, I'm not getting food. I'm out of here. Again, you learn that this is going to have this result. No big deal. Then the researchers were like, let's like mess around here. How about sometimes when the rat presses the lever, we'll give some food. Sometimes we won't. It'll be completely at random. And can you guess what happened to the rats?
They were crazy. These rats
died.
Oh, yeah, those rats died because they were going after the food. Right. They're like, where's the freaking pellets?
Maniacally pressing. They stopped drinking water. They just stopped like everything. They just kept pressing. And, whether it's that gambler at the slot machine or whether that's you like waiting if this person's going to check your IG story because they didn't reply to your text message, it's the same thing. When you don't know when the reward is going to come, when it's spontaneous and unpredictable, it causes you to feel the sense of addiction. And when we don't understand this, we think it's because they're so great. That's why I'm feeling so much intensity when it's not.
It has nothing to do with the person. They're literally just playing a game. They understand. I mean, I don't know how conscious they are about it, but what we're talking about is like if you're dating someone, you get a really sexy text, but then you don't hear from them for a few weeks. And then they drop in one day, then you're getting up again. And it's all these layers that keep us attached to things that aren't necessarily healthy for us at all.
Yeah. And sometimes they are aware. Like, I don't think people generally are manipulative trying to do this, but a lot of the times there is a validation they get to have that tether to be like, I still got it. I can still do that little poke and I'll get that attention. Yeah, it feels good. And I got my fix. I'm going to continue doing my thing.
Exactly. I got a bunch of other people that I got to keep connected to. But, when we see that coming in, I guess we can start to recognize, I guess that's what you're saying. Eventually you go through time, you're like, that's not okay. Oh, this person who's an inconsistent texter, this person who's always late, or this person's breaking their promises. Hopefully we only go through that, once or twice in our life with people. And then we start to make better choices and choose healthier partners.
Yeah. And again, it's like, instead of focusing so much on them, focus on, oh, I'm feeling anxiety. Every time I have an interaction with this person, I spiral. I don't want to feel that way. So therefore, I'm going to use those cues about myself to either have a conversation and communicate like an adult, be like, hey, what's up? Or I'm going to step out of the cycle of hot and cold.
So then it's really helping people realize that like you can, rebuild again. So when you're doing your boot camps and you're working with clients, or that you having them, they're identifying the patterns. I love the idea of writing down your exes that you dated and then circling literally the common denominators, the things that were, and then being like, okay, did this serve me? It didn't serve me. And then do you help them write a new directive of what they're looking for or values?
Yeah.
And how to actually embody those and feel those?
Yeah. So we do an exercise where they identify their top values. And again, they rate themselves first so that they can work on their own. And that is really what they're looking for in the evaluation stage when they are dating different people, to see if there is an alignment of values. And another thing we have them do is to write their non-negotiables list, because we know that when the love cocktail starts happening, we forget and we rationalize. And so when you have these are the actual no's. You can come back to this list. You can have an accountability buddy that can see it as well. And when someone crosses it, you don't rationalize it away.
What are the no's that you're like, no, that has to be a no? And they're like,
yeah, I think one of the big ones is availability. So someone who's not available. And that could mean someone who's living in a different continent, right? Like, it's not that the person is a bad person, but you want a committed relationship in your city. And so stop dating someone who lives, a totally different time zone than you, right?
Yeah. I kept thinking about people who date married people, I'm like, that's the perfect example of it. They're like, oh, they just keep finding you. Like, they're not finding you, but you are attracted to that adrenaline. Is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? Right. Okay. Yeah. So that's what availability. What are some other common ones that we missed, but that are really important?
Someone who is, I think, mutually invested. And that is really, you can tell, like if you are the one who's constantly, okay, I'll change my plans to make it happen. I'll meet you in your town in the city. Like when that's happening and you notice that there's just a major imbalance, that's a non-negotiable. And someone is not mutually invested. They will only be with you if it's convenient for you. For them, it's not a relationship that's going anywhere.
I mean, it's so funny, just like friendships. Like you don't date people who make you feel bad in friendships, who are like, they're not reliable, they don't show up. You know, it's just like everything. It's really just a way to understand, people and understand yourself and what you really won't put up with. So you've got your non-negotiables.
Yeah.
And then
knowing what a difference between a non-negotiable and a preference is. Because a preference is 6'2". A preference is that they like skiing like you do. And the research shows that none of that stuff matters when it comes to a long-term happy relationship. It doesn't matter that you guys like golfing together. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
So
that stuff that we think matters doesn't matter.
And because humans adapt, that person that you're like, oh my gosh, 10 out of 10 attraction, like because they're so hot, 2 years in, that hotness, you get used to it. So you're not like, so what is the glue that is left when you adapt to all those shiny qualities that will not matter 2 years down the road?
A lot of my listeners, when I'm thinking about all the questions I get over breakups over the years, and what I get all the time is, why can't I get over my ex? And I always think about them like during sex. They're probably the best I ever had. And I feel like a lot of times we're just like, we don't think we'll ever find that again. So what do you do with that? And how do you get people to reconnect with themselves sexually and realize it wasn't about their partner per se?
Yeah, we bring in a sex therapist to help specifically with this because so often we think that the reason why we felt this hot chemistry or we felt so sensual is because of them. But they tapped into something and helped us connect something that was already within us, which is great news because we can cultivate that and then cultivate that thing and have it with other people. So we are the source of it, not Joe or Lance, right?
That's it. Like it is not about that person. It is not about that person at all, right? It's about how they made us feel. What a gift. And I can find that with other people, right?
Yeah. And I mean, this is a journey I'm on as well. Like I spent most of my life performing. Like I was like, oh, this is what a sexy Asian girl does. And that's what I did for a very long time.
What does a sexy Asian girl do?
I'm submissive, I'm cute, and I'm sweet, and I'll cook you eggs afterwards. Like that's what I was doing.
Really? That's where you started? How did you get out of that? That's amazing. I mean, you grew up with that. Like that's what you used to do.
That, and guys would eventually like break up with me or not want to keep hanging out with me, and they would say like, I don't know, like something just felt off, and they didn't know, but what they sensed was I was not myself. I was just performing, trying to be what I thought that they wanted, and so it has been a journey for me. I've only started learning about sex. That's why I started listening to your podcast. I have had to rewire these narratives and like learn how to tap into my sexuality and into my body and not just like makes my orgasm someone else's responsibility. Like that's a new concept for me.
It is a new concept. That's such a big awakening. Many people don't really get there, that you realize like you were like, they're not emotionally available. But really, they were seeing that you weren't emotionally available because you were in this performance. You really weren't because you didn't even know it. So that's when your wake up call, that's so interesting. And then you're like, okay, so who am I? Without a man, without anybody, like who am I? Right, Amy.
Yeah.
And so that's when you're like, started doing these practices, right?
And I'm healing through these boot camps, right?
Still,
like I bring in all these experts, and it's through like having a sex therapist there or having a tantra person there, and I'm like taking notes. Like, okay, I gotta practice this. Like I go, okay, I'm in charge of my own orgasm. Okay, I'm gonna do sensual energy. I'm gonna look in the mirror while putting oil on my body. Like
exactly, we're responsible for our own orgasm, but we don't tell women that. I think so many women fall into the performative trap, whether it's in dating or the way we have sex or the way we relate. Same thing. I started faking orgasms for like the first many years I was having sex. I was like, that does not seem like equitable. No, they're always having a good time. I am not. What do we do? And then to take back those layers is such a process and a journey. And I love what you're saying. You're never done learning, right? No, you're always on the path. How did you start dating again?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think really it's been being in a healthy partnership, where I started changing some of these things because I never felt safe with people.
And that came from your childhood.
Yeah. And I was just trying to make them like me and choose me. And like, if I was sexy, sweet, and intelligent and ambitious, then maybe they would choose me. And like, I've now been with my partner for 4.5 years. And like, I am learning, like, even not checking out, right? I'm going to actually like focus on the sensations in my body. Like, that's a new
During
thing
sex,
for
you
me.
mean? Okay, let's get into that. So, yeah, so you learned to like just not leave your body and be like the perfect girlfriend. You were like, what am I feeling right now? Can you talk about your first experience with that?
Yeah, because I would notice during sex, my mind would go somewhere else. Whether it's a fantasy, whether it's playing a scene, it could even be playing a scene with my partner from a different time. What the hell? And so I learned through one of the sex therapists, like actually just focus on the sensation in your body. And doing that has really, really helped me. And it seems so simple and so small, but these little things, they add up. And now I'm working on like, well, how do I feel more libido and sensuality without waiting for my partner to draw a bath and do these things? And I'm still figuring it out. I don't know.
Yeah,
Help
no,
me.
no, but that's it. That's a process. But no, it sounds like you're that's exactly it. Well, first, going back to the question to people who say like I can only have sex with my ex and it's on them. No, when you like, first off, when you slow down and you do start to just touch your body and realize that you can give yourself pleasure, then you can start to link up your sexuality with yourself and not label it with anybody else, right? But also the part about getting present in your body is because so many people, we leave our brains, we're thinking about our ex, we're thinking about the laundry. I think one of the biggest challenges people have is staying present during sex. And that is such a great experience, is just saying like the second your mind floats away to go, what am I feeling? Like, okay, I even use the 5 senses, like my hands are my partner's chest. What am I smelling right now? What am I tasting? And that really is such a way to be more embodied and to try to say like, it doesn't have to be about my mind leaving. I can bring it back. Even if it leaves a few times, you just keep bringing it back, right?
Yeah.
Every single time.
Yeah. I did actually a Tantra workshop.
Oh, okay. Tell me. I love Tantra.
One of the exercises I loved was we had to do 10 minutes where one person would give the other person a full body massage, but it couldn't lead to intercourse. And then the timer would go off and then you'd switch. And I cried when I did this exercise because I've been so used to balancing it out. Like, oh my God, I got to do this now. Like so concerned with the experience of my partner that to just receive was a very vulnerable thing for me.
Receiving is really big when it comes to sex. It's so, especially if you're a giver, which a lot of us are, to think that this person actually wants to be pleasing me and touching my body, and you just got to breathe through it. And then, it's amazing that you've been doing, all this work and you're teaching it to all the people that come, right? Because that's the thing about dating. Like, we make it seem like we're just on a one track to find that person. We waste so much time. Like, basically, you're helping people be more efficient. Like, you're just cutting the bullshit. Like, you could save decades.
Yeah.
Like, literally decades of patterning, but just knowing like I can choose different people, I can make different choices, I can feel differently. Yeah. This isn't necessarily, my lot in life. And I think sometimes too, like, they're kind of a gift, the breakups, because you look at like what are the lessons here? I mean, there's lessons in everything, true, but in every kind of ending, that's really, I always say you're never going to regret leaving a relationship, a home, or a job. I almost feel like those are time to leave. It was ready to leave, and there's so much to learn in those places, but especially in relationships.
I find that a lot with people who are trying to date. And I know it's hard to date in this landscape. Like, the research is showing it. It's harder than ever right now. And I think we can think that it's because we are flawed. But in my experience working with people who are single, most people are usually just a few blind spots away from shifting their path. And you need to know where it is that you stand, right? So, for example, there's all this stuff about red flags and there's narcissists out there. Like, you need to know, like, are you too much on the spectrum of you don't trust anyone, so everything's closed? Or are you too far in the spectrum where you have zero standards and you're just going to take anything that comes because you're almost like a hungry person at a grocery store? So you need to know where you are. And then from there, you can see, okay, how can I push my edge a little bit to get more balanced? But the same advice isn't going to work for everyone.
Right. You're finding more and more people are avoided. They don't even have the skill set to socialize, right, these days, because we're so isolated, but just feeling like, yeah, there's so much fear around it now. But you're right, when you're fear and vulnerability, they just, they can't live in the same space.
Yeah.
But if we don't feel safe, so then how do you work with people to start, because really it's not trusting others is not trusting ourselves, right? So we have to start to trust ourselves first.
So the very first step is actually going to surprise you. It is actually getting very clear on who what I call your trusted circle is, because the people you're surrounded with, they are wiring your brain. So if you are exposed to people, and this isn't even people you like, it could be your boss or the person you carpool with. If you're constantly exposed to people who make you feel like you have to walk on eggshells, who are criticizing you, you're not building the necessary neural pathways for trust and healthy connection. So it's going to be nearly impossible for you suddenly to be at the bar and be like, okay, like I'm going to trust you. Like you have to work on building up those neural pathways. So who's in your trusted circle now? And if you are missing people that you could feel safe with, who you can feel you could be yourself with, work on that. Build those friendships, invest in those people, double down on that, and then figure out how you can decrease your exposure to those low safety people.
It is so important that our friendships are like medicine, right? Like we need our friendships. And then once you start to build that muscle of trusting people again, you'll be able to kind of let other people in. I think that what I love is people jump right into wanting to get to another relationship. They're skipping this step of actually building it and experiencing it in their own life. Like it's hard to build the trust in a relationship if you haven't trusted yourself or you don't have a circle of trust around you.
Yeah. And I think if you are that person who's like, well, I just want the next relationship. Why? Why are you in such a hurry? What is causing this? I got to get it now. Like I have to be hunting. Like what is that? Is that coming from a healthy, helpful place? And you got to do a little bit of digging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, is that societal conditioning or beliefs that we have to like settle down and we're only half a person if we are single? Are you finding out that the people that you work with are sort of more open to staying single longer or not necessarily jumping to that next relationship? Or an alternative kind of style?
I'm finding that people are doing alternative styles because that is what they think they can get.
I just talked to this couples therapist. We were at a conference together and she said 60% of her clients, 35 and under, are now in an open relationship. Are you finding that as well? Or are you thinking that people are just sort of falling into that because it kind of is just sort of serving maybe their avoidant tendencies and they haven't really learned how to love yet? Or do you think this is something that we should be welcoming and exploring?
So I think that there's definitely a more open mind of different types of relationship styles. And I think that's great. What I have an issue with is I have a lot of clients who are in situationships or they want a committed partnership and the other person doesn't. So they will just deal with it because that's the only way that they'll have access to this person. And I think that you're lying to yourself. So I think you have to be really honest. Do you really want this? Or are you only doing it because you think that's all you can get? And maybe it self-selects the type of people that come to me are people who want a committed relationship.
That makes sense too, because situationships are just, I mean, when are they really healthy, right? There's no boundaries, there's no clarity. You don't know what's coming, what's going, and it's going to keep you attached and addicted to those chemicals, right? Those same thing, that same up and down.
Yeah. And I have people who are like, okay, well, we have really clear parameters of how the situationship's going to work. And, I know that it's not going to be really, well, what do you think is going to happen when you're sharing yourself emotionally, physically, intimately through a long period of time? Like you can't control that. Sorry, you can't think your way out of falling for someone. And usually it's one person that ends up really hurt.
Always. You try to tell people that, but sometimes they just have to go through it. So what are the other things that you work with people with on their sexual relationships too, right? You have your boot camp and you have different practitioners help people like with, somatic sensing, and
we have a dominatrix that comes. She teaches the psychology of power dynamics because that's definitely a big theme of the people who come, feeling very disempowered in their relationships, even though they're powerful badasses in their jobs. So
feeling disempowered. Yeah. Feeling like, what does it look like to, and how are we giving away our power to, right?
Yeah, because it can start off feeling like very equal. And then somewhere along the way, it's like death by a thousand cuts. You kind of like, okay, I don't I won't do this weekend trip to like do yoga meditation because that's the only weekend you have free. Or I won't, okay, fine. Like I won't express this need because I'm scared it's going to make you upset. It happens very slowly. And then eventually get to a spot where they are so scared of losing the person, or there's such an uneven power dynamic and the gap has been so widened and they don't even know who they are anymore. Like I wasn't this person before.
Amy, let's talk about the different stages of love.
Okay. So a lot of people don't know this and then they make a big mistake and they dump their partner 2 years in. So learn this. There's two main stages of love. And the first stage is that romantic, passionate stage. And the chemicals are very different, right? It's namely like dopamine, right? Which is the motivator. You don't know this person enough, so everything's exciting, it's novel, and you feel those butterflies in your stomach, you feel in love. And then what happens is eventually these chemicals can't continue, otherwise you would get no work done, you'd just be having sex all day. And so eventually those chemicals shift and you move into the second stage of love, which is called the companionate stage of love. And these chemicals are different, like vasopressin, oxytocin. They're termed the here and now chemicals. It makes you appreciate what's present. You're not wondering what's happening in your future because you've already experienced this person, but you don't feel that they walk in the room and I want to just rip your clothes off like you did with that intensity in the beginning. And when people don't understand this, they think something is wrong in their relationship. And often they'll be like, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. And they will end it with someone who is a great partner for them. And so what's happening is Mother Nature is just not going to do the job for you anymore. Sorry, you got to do the work to cultivate intimacy, add novelty, continue growing together, add romance and sparks into your life versus just waiting for the dopamine to hit you and like a lightning bolt.
If we just explain to people that it's literally your chemistry, it's really literally your physiology. Don't get married at this stage. Don't have a baby. Don't move in together. Like it's a good time, but it's really not, meant. And when it ends, it doesn't mean that it's over. Like that's exactly what I did. I left so many relationships in my 20s because I was like, well, we're done here. I don't want to have sex with you anymore. I'm done. We're bored. This is not good. I will never be in a relationship where sex gets boring. I'm out.
Right.
Yeah, I did that for a long time. And that's probably what I started Sex with Emily because I was like, what is wrong with me that I want to leave? I'm like, oh, it takes work. I heard it takes work, but what is the work? And now you realize that like you could really make almost any relationship work with somebody who has a growth mindset around growth and relationships and stuff like that.
Yeah. And that might sound unromantic, but it's reality. Like the reality is if it is a long-term relationship that you are looking for, most of that time is going to be spent in the companionate stage of love.
Let's talk about, so the companion stage, you're there and that's when you bond, you love, that's when it really it's hard. You go through your first fights. Yeah. You learn who each other are, and then you can make decisions from there. But the problem is so many people are just going back to that. That's all they remember is the early stage. It's like everyone's addicted to that's why some people have affairs because like, I want to have that again. Yeah. But so that's something you have to make, you have to make peace with, that you might not have that again if you decide to stay with the same person, but then you create other things that are just as beautiful and meaningful.
Yeah, and I think also there could be a fear around the deepening of intimacy and vulnerability that happens in the companionate stage of love. Someone sees you sees you through your food poisoning, like the farts at night, like all of you, and that could be really scary. And so we could rationalize and be like, oh, I'm not in love with you, and then hop to the next person, when really it's a way of not letting someone in too close. And I almost think like, should we maybe we optimize for our best friend that we want to make out with, because that's really like where we're going to spend majority of our time.
I've had so much time. I've thought about that a lot because it really does matter. Because at the end of the day, you are not having sex all the time and wanting to rip each other's clothes off. That is not reality at all. That is the complete exception, and it's not the rule. Right. And to normalize that it's in every relationship. In my relationship, you got to work on your sex life. Just because I know what to do to get myself there doesn't mean that I always want sex all the time. No one will after a while. So yeah, it's somebody you want to hang out with a lot, because you will be hanging out a lot. And what's real for them. Question I have for you. You said that sometimes people who are good at dating are not necessarily good at relationships.
Yeah. I know a lot of people and some of my own friends who are great at the romantic gestures and making you feel like you're the most important person in the world. But when it comes to relationship, which does require work and emotional skill and growth and moving through the uncomfortable parts, and instead of saying, see ya, I'm just going to go to the thing that feels fun. I'm like, I'm going to sit with these uncomfortable emotions. I'm going to do the work. I'm going to listen to this podcast, Sex with Emily, with my partner so we can get better. Like those are the hard things. And that is a different set of skill than the Casanova that can like sweep you off your feet for the first 3 weeks.
Exactly. That's what we were told, though. Cinderella, all the stories, we're still rewiring everything that we've had to learn in the past and realize it now.
I think that we need to stop trying to appeal to the masses. I used to be like, okay, I need to be a feminine girl, so I have to do these things. And now I'm like, this is me. I mean, you can call it masculine because I'm so ambitious in my work and I'll make decisions and I'll take charge of a situation and maybe I'm controlling sometimes. Or maybe that's just me and I love it. And if you don't like it, that's okay. And like I've had clients where they've tried to hide part of themselves because they thought that it wasn't feminine enough or masculine enough. And one of my clients, she was always told her personality was too big and she was too intense. And so she would try to like do these like gymnastics and contort herself to be something she wasn't without any success until she accepted how she was. And she's now, she's done the dating experiment. She's with an engineer who's very quiet, who loves the fact that she's loud and she comes into the room and takes up the spotlight. He loves the very thing that other guys would fault her for. And if she appealed to the masses, she would have never attracted this guy.
Yeah, I understand that. Okay, I've got a few questions here from listeners. I thought you could help me answer, Amy. This is from Christine. She's 25 in Ohio. Hey, Dr. Emily, I've been sexting my ex for a year. I'm fine with our situation as is, but if he wanted to get back together, I'd say yes in a heartbeat. How do I protect myself from future heartbreak and keep it purely sexual? Oh, it's going to be tricky.
Okay.
She's sexting with her ex. So this is this attachment to, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, that you're keeping yourself in the past. You're really attached to something that happened, before, and she's really not moving forward and learning. And now she's kind of convincing herself that she'd say yes because it could just be sexual, when right now she's already attached and embroiled in it still. What would you have to say?
Christine, right?
Yeah, Christine.
Christine, I know that there is like something you're getting from this, but the reality is you are in a relationship with your ex and he is not in a relationship with you.
Yes.
And the longer you keep this going and you can rationalize in your mind that it's just sex and it's just that, you just have to know that your heart is closed for business for any other opportunity. There's no opportunity cost. Yeah. There is opportunity cost for what you're doing.
Exactly. And also, you're staying with one person. You're not allowing anyone else to come in, right?
Yeah.
Shut down. Yeah, we got to move on. We got to move on. Lovingly, Christine, we keep us posted. This is from Stephanie. Hey, Dr. Emily, I'm a big fan of yours. My question for you is, as a single mother who's been divorced for over 5 years, how can I get back into the dating world after being single for so long and focusing on myself and my kids? Any starter tips or suggestions are greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. I love this because she's like, this is just so common. People have been out of the game and they want to get back in the game. And how do they do it? How do they feel in their body? How do they know what to look for? Yeah. What do we do?
First, I think you have to start putting yourself out there. And I think starting an online dating profile, as much as it's scary, maybe your first step is just to set it up and you don't have to even swipe on anyone, but just do that first step. And then another thing you could do, I really encourage people to do meetup groups on an activity you already like. So maybe it's hiking. There's thousands of these types of groups. And so you're not going to miss out on anything because you're doing something that you like, but you will meet like-minded people. Maybe there'll be a friend, or maybe it'll be a best friend you want to make out with. You don't know.
Exactly. They all lead to each other.
Yeah.
Friends you might meet someone you're attracted to through a friend. Thanks, Stephanie. Okay, so now, Amy, I'm going to ask you the 5 quickie questions we ask all of our guests.
Okay.
Just quick questions here. Okay, what's your biggest turn on?
French kissing.
What's your biggest turn off?
Ooh, shit. Jackhammering.
Yes.
Oh my God, can I say that?
Yes, you can. I'm going to shake your hand on that one. No jackhammering. What makes good sex?
Eye contact, just being aligned, like spiritually, physically, emotionally.
Yes. Something you would tell your younger self about sex and relationships.
Stop performing. Remember that you are the one choosing, not waiting to be chosen.
Number one thing you wish everyone knew about sex.
That it could be such a beautiful portal for intimacy with yourself and with another person.
Amy, where can everyone find you?
Ooh, so my book is called Breakup Bootcamp, and I'm running both breakup boot camps and my dating boot camp. So you just go to renewbootcamps.com and on Instagram, Miss Amy Chan.
Thank you so much for being here.
This was so fun.
So fun. Thank you. That's it for today's episode. See you on Friday. Thanks for listening to Sex with Emily, and be sure to like, subscribe, and give us a review wherever you listen to the podcast, and share this with a friend or a partner. You can find me on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, or X, and Facebook, all at Sex with Emily. Oh, and I've been told I give really good emails, so sign up at sexwithemily.com. And while you're there, check out my free guides and articles for more ways to prioritize your pleasure. And if you want to ask me about your sex life, dating, or relationships, call my hotline, 559-TALK-SEX. That's 559-825-5739. Or go to sexwithemily.com/askemily. Was it good for you? Email me, feedback@sexwithemily.com.